The thunder hit at 11:47 p.m., not the rolling kind, the kind that arrives like a verdict. I'd been watching the elevator panel from the kitchen, glass of water I hadn't touched, when the number stopped climbing at 42. My floor. I wasn't expecting anyone. The three people who knew I was here were either compromised, dead, or both. The doors opened. She stepped out carrying nothing but a hard drive and the particular expression of someone who has already calculated exactly how many ways this could go wrong. She looked at me the way people look at locked doors, not asking permission, deciding, "You're Callahan," she said. It wasn't a question. That was the first problem. The second was that I hadn't been Callahan in 4 years. Dangerous secrets, slow-burning tension, and two people who should know better, told in the voice of a man who never looks away. If you love this kind of stories, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from, because the next part might make you feel the thrill of being in love again, or maybe fill that brokenness you've been carrying. Either way, stay tuned. "11:51 p.m. The penthouse ran 20 degrees warmer than it should have. The building's climate system had been locked out along with everything else when the surveillance net came down 6 hours ago. I'd opened the floor to ceiling windows on the north face, but the air coming off the city was wet and tasted like the storm building 3 miles out. She was still standing near the elevator. Hadn't moved toward me, hadn't moved toward the door. Smart. She was mapping the room the same way I had the first night I'd taken the cover. Exits, sight lines, what was missing? A woman who'd been trained, or had trained herself through necessity. I'd learned to tell the difference. This was the second kind, harder, more dangerous. "How did you get up here?" I said. "Service override, parking sublevel." She said it without pride. Just logistics. I looked at the hard drive in her hand, standard external casing, the kind that held either nothing or everything. She caught me looking and didn't move it behind her back. That was interesting. Most people hide the thing they're most afraid of losing. She held it out like a challenge. "I need 48 hours, she said. Outside, the first real thunder arrived, low and structural, the kind that vibrates in the chest rather than the ears. She didn't flinch. I noted that. I note everything. It's the thing that kept me alive, through 6 years of a life that technically belonged to someone else, and the thing that made me very bad at stopping. "You have a name," I said. Not a question either. "Mara, probably true." People under real pressure usually lead with their actual first name. It's the last thing they let go of. I stepped back from the kitchen counter, and she read the gesture correctly, not an invitation, an evaluation. She crossed the room anyway. 7 steps. She counted them too. I watched her do it. I still hadn't decided what she was. Midnight. The storm's outer edge reached the building. Not rain yet, just pressure. The atmosphere reorganizing itself around something inevitable. The penthouse lights flickered once. I'd installed the secondary power cell on the 3rd day of the lockdown, so they steadied. She noticed the flicker, and then noticed that I wasn't concerned about it. She filed that away. I watched her file it. She'd set the hard drive on the kitchen island between us like a mediator. "You were the handler for the Verano account," she said. 2019 to 2021. I let the silence run its full length before I answered. "You've got the wrong person. I have the documents." "Then you don't need me. The documents need context." She looked at me with the particular steadiness of someone who has already been afraid and come out the other side into something colder. Verano's subsidiary moved money through 11 shell structures. I can prove where it went, and I can't prove who signed off on letting it move. Thunder again. Closer. The windows trembled with it. "And you think I can?" "I think you did," she said. "And I think someone in your organization found out I was close, which is why I have 6 hours before the people following me stop being careful about who sees them." I looked at her. She looked back. The hard drive sat between us like a question I hadn't agreed to answer. She'd come here with evidence. a deadline, and a name she shouldn't have had. She was asking me to confirm something I had never confirmed to anyone, and she was doing it in a lockdown penthouse during a storm that was about to take out half the city's grid. She was either the most dangerous person I'd met in a decade, or the most desperate. I was becoming concerned. It might be both. 12:38 a.m. The rain arrived without preamble. One moment the windows were dry, and the next they were sheets. The city below dissolved into abstract light. I'd pulled the blackout panels on the south exposure. Anyone with a long lens from the neighboring tower had been watching this floor for 2 days. She didn't ask why. She helped, taking the east panel without being told which end to anchor. Her hands were competent. She'd done this kind of thing before. Not the panel specifically, but the choreography of staying invisible. We worked in silence. That was its own kind of information. When we finished, the room felt sealed, different, smaller. She sat at the kitchen island and opened the hard drive on my laptop without asking. That bothered me less than it should have. I stood 3 feet behind her and watched the files populate and told myself I was reading the directory structure. I was also noticing that she smelled like rain and something underneath the rain. Something that had nothing to do with surveillance or shell corporations and everything to do with the fact that I had been in this penthouse alone for 6 days, and she was the first living person I'd stood close to in all of them. This column, she said, pointing. The transfers flagged in March 2020. I leaned in, 7 figures, cycling through 4 accounts, none of them staying warm longer than 72 hours. I recognized the pattern, the way you recognize a scar, not by thinking, but by the body's memory. My jaw tightened. She felt the change in me without turning around. You've seen this before, she said. Not a question. Again, possibly, I said. She turned then. We were closer than I'd measured. I didn't step back, neither did she. I need a yes or no, she said quietly. Outside, thunder split the sky open. In the room, neither of us moved. 1:15 a.m. The temperature had finally dropped. The storm pulling the heat out of the city, the way storms eventually take everything. I'd given her the spare blanket from the hall closet, without making an event of it. She'd taken it the same way, wrapping it around her shoulders and continuing to work. The laptop between us, the hard drive, 47 files I was actively trying not to have an opinion about. She'd kicked her shoes off at some point. I noticed because I notice everything, and because the sight of her in her socks at my kitchen island with a blanket around her shoulders was doing something complicated to the professional distance I'd been maintaining by sheer discipline. The Meridian account, I said. 3rd column, she scrolled, stopped. You know this one. I know the name it's buried under. I pulled the laptop slightly toward me and typed a routing number from memory. Her eyebrows moved, just slightly. The money that went in didn't come from Verano directly. It came from a consulting firm incorporated in Liechtenstein, 2018. That's not in any of these files. No, I said. It wouldn't be. She looked at me for a long moment. The blanket had slipped from one shoulder. She didn't fix it. I made a point of looking at the screen. How do you know that routing number? She said. I used to move things for people, I said, before I moved things for other people. It was the most honest thing I'd said in 4 years. It was also the most dangerous. She heard both of those things in it. I could tell by the way she went very still, the way careful people do when they're recalibrating. Are you still working for them? She asked. The thunder answered before I did, which was its own kind of answer. No, I said. Not for a while. 2:03. The storm had reached the kind of sustained intensity that stops feeling like weather and starts feeling like a decision the sky has made. The lights had dipped twice in the last hour, held both times, but barely. She'd moved to the couch with the laptop, files spread in a logic across the cushions that I recognized as her system, not improvisation. I was in the chair, 6 feet away. The distance felt deliberate. Both of us were working to keep it. There's a name in the March files that's been redacted, she said, manually, not system scrubbed. Someone went into this archive and took it out by hand. I already knew which name it was. What was it? I said. She looked up. That's what I'm asking you. We stayed like that. Her on the couch, me in the chair, the laptop between us carrying 6 years of things I'd agreed to forget. The fire I'd lit an hour ago had burned down to orange. The thunder came again, long and rolling, and when it faded, the silence that replaced it was the kind that presses. She closed the laptop. That surprised me. I watched her set it aside, and stand and cross the room, and stop 2 feet in front of my chair. She was still holding the blanket around her. Her feet were still bare. She looked tired in the specific way people look when they've been afraid for too long, and the fear has started burning through the fuel and leaving something roar underneath. "Tell me the name," she said, quietly. "Mara, tell me if it's yours." The fire snapped. Outside, something, a shutter, a cable, tore loose in the wind and clattered against the building. She didn't move. I stood up. We were close enough that I could see exactly when her expression shifted from steel to something more difficult. "It's not mine," I said. She let out a breath. "Then, but you know whose it is." "Yes." She reached up. I don't know if she meant to touch my face or just meant to say something, and I caught her wrist, gently. We stayed like that. Her pulse was fast. She didn't try to pull away. Then, "We're already out of time," she said. 2:41 a.m. She hadn't moved far. The window, 6 feet from where I was standing, looking out at the rain she couldn't really see through the blacked-out glass. I told her. Not everything. Enough. The name had sat in the air between us for a full minute before either of us decided what to do with it. She'd said, "He was my director for 2 years." I'd said nothing because there was nothing to say. She turned from the window now. The blanket was gone. She'd set it down somewhere and forgotten it. Her expression was the particular stillness of someone who has been handed a truth that changes the shape of everything that came before it and is now rebuilding the map in real time. "You tried to expose this," she said, "in 2021. Not a question. I was getting used to that." "I tried," I said. "Yes, what happened?" "Someone moved faster." I looked at the hard drive on the island. They buried the file and reassigned me to a cover so deep I was supposed to lose myself in it. For most people that works. I looked at her. "You came here because you found a name in those files. You weren't sure it was mine, but you came anyway. I needed to know. You could have gone to the press, federal oversight, 6 safer options." She looked at me steadily. "I needed to know first," she said, "before I destroyed anyone." That was a thing I hadn't expected. I stood very still with the weight of it. She crossed back toward me, stopped close. "There are people 30 minutes behind me," she said. "Maybe less. They stopped being subtle about 2 hours ago." Her voice was even. Her eyes were not. "If tonight goes badly, it won't. If it does," she looked up at me, and whatever she'd been holding in place for the last 3 hours moved behind her expression like weather changing. "I need you to know that I came here because of the name, but I stayed because of you." I didn't answer. I kissed her instead, or she kissed me. I'm honestly not sure which one of us finally broke. I only know that when it happened, it felt less like a beginning and more like an admission neither of us had meant to make out loud. She pulled back first, pressed her forehead against mine, closed her eyes. 30 minutes, she said. 28, I said. "Get your shoes." 3:09 a.m. She was dressed, the hard drive pocketed, her shoes back on with the focused efficiency of someone who had packed a life into small bags before and knew which steps to skip. I was already at the secondary panel, running the exit options against the surveillance grid I'd mapped in my first week here. 2 routes viable, 1 clean, 1 ugly. The clean one would take 9 minutes. We had 7. Sublevel 3, I said. "There's a maintenance corridor that exits onto Harwick Lane." I came up through sublevel 4. "They'll know that." She nodded. No argument. She was good in a crisis. The fear converted cleanly into focus. No waste. I'd worked with trained operatives who managed less. We moved to the service stairs. I went first. She matched my pace exactly, close enough that I could feel the displacement of air as we descended. 14 floors to sublevel 3. The stairwell smelled like concrete and old water and the particular staleness of spaces no one is supposed to use. At the sublevel door I stopped. Listened. She pressed in close behind me, her hand briefly on my back, steadying herself, or steadying me, I wasn't sure. It registered anyway. Everything registers. Clear. We crossed the maintenance corridor in 90 seconds. The Harwick exit was a heavy steel door with a crash bar. I pressed it open 2 inches. Checked the lane. A black sedan, running dark. 30 meters east. I let the door close. She was right behind me. Close enough that when I turned, we were nearly face to face in the corridor's single strip of emergency lighting. "They're here," I said. "How many?" "1 vehicle visible. There'll be another on the west end." She processed this. Her jaw tightened. "Then, the hard drive." "Yes. If they take it, they won't." She looked at me with the particular expression of someone who needs to believe something and isn't sure yet. "If they do." I held that look and didn't look away. "There's a third way out," I said. "It's ugly, wet, cold. 30-second exposure on the service roof before we reach the adjacent building." She pulled her jacket tighter. "Fine, Mara." She looked at me. "When we get out of this." I stopped. "When?" she said. "Not if." Her voice was very quiet. "When?" I said. She nodded once. We went back up. 3:22 a.m. The service roof was everything I promised. The storm hitting it with full violence, the kind of rain that isn't individual drops anymore, but a single continuous cold force. 30 seconds of exposure meant 30 seconds of this. She went first without being asked. I watched her move across the roof with her head down and her arms close to her body, the hard drive inside her jacket, and I kept my eyes on the rooftop access point of the adjacent building and not on her, which took more discipline than the 2 operatives I'd seen flanking the building's east face. 28 seconds. The access door was unlocked. I'd made a call 4 hours ago that I hadn't told her about, to a number I wasn't supposed to still have. Someone on the other end had made a decision. I'd find out the cost of that later. Inside, the building was a hotel. Off-season, 2/3 empty. We moved through the service corridor to a room I'd booked 6 months ago under a name that didn't connect to anything, a contingency I'd built in for a situation I hadn't fully imagined. She sat on the edge of the bed, caught her breath. Her hair was completely soaked. She was shaking, not fear, temperature. I found the extra blanket in the closet, brought it over. She took it without ceremony and pulled it around herself, and then she looked up at me. And the expression on her face was something I'd been careful not to look at directly all evening, because looking at it directly required acknowledging that the last 3 hours hadn't been only about the hard drive. "They were 30 seconds behind us," she said. She was half out of her jacket, still shaking. She grabbed my face with both hands, sudden and certain, and looked at me like someone who has run out of time and room and reasons not to say the true thing. "If we die tonight," she said, "I need you to know." She stopped. She didn't finish it. She didn't have to. I put my hands over hers. The storm outside was a physical thing, pressing at the windows. Inside, the room went very quiet. Whatever she hadn't said sat between us whole and complete, the kind of thing you can't take back and wouldn't want to. She reached for the lamp. I didn't stop her. The room went dark. 7:14 a.m. The storm had resolved itself into something quieter. A steady, soft rain, the kind that comes after violence and has nothing left to prove. The room was gray with early light around the curtain edges. She was still there when I surfaced. I hadn't let myself expect that. I lay still and listened to her breathe, and thought about the last time I'd wanted someone to stay and how long ago that had been. She was at the window when I finally moved, standing in my shirt. She'd found it on the chair in the dark, watching the street below, her arms crossed loosely. Old habit. I recognized it because I had the same one, the same orientation toward exits and threats, even in the supposed peace of morning. I made 2 cups without asking. She took hers without thanking me. We stood at the window together and watched the wet street, and I thought, this is the most honest thing I've done in 6 years. "The file," she said eventually. "I know someone who can receive it cleanly. No chain of custody issues. One you trust. Someone who owes me a truth," I said. Which is better? She looked sideways at me over her cup. The shirt was too big. She'd rolled the cuffs. I was not going to make a problem of that. The man whose name was in the file, she said. He'll come. He'll try. You're not concerned. I'm concerned about exactly the right amount. I looked at her. She turned back to the window. The rain moved across the glass in long, quiet lines. What happens to you? She said. After. Unclear. What do you want to happen? I held the question. Outside, a delivery truck moved slowly through the wet street, completely ordinary, completely indifferent to every choice made in this room in the last 12 hours. Something I haven't let myself want in a long time, I said. She didn't answer, but she didn't move away from the window either. We stood close in the gray morning, 2 cups of coffee between us and the rest of it unresolved, and somehow, for the first time in years, that felt less like a problem and more like something worth surviving to figure out. At exactly 9 in the morning, the contact came. 2 knocks, the pattern I'd specified, nothing after. I took the hard drive to the door and made the transfer in 45 seconds. Clean. Done. She watched from the window, not the door. She understood the architecture of plausible distance. When I came back, she was dressed. Her jacket was mostly dry. She'd found her shoes. We stood in the room, and the room felt different now. The emergency had moved into the past tense, and what was left was just us, which was either easier or harder. I hadn't decided. The case breaks in a few days, I said. When it does, you'll need to be somewhere they can find you for the right reasons. I have a place. I know. She looked at me. I said, I looked into you 3 months ago. When the file first surfaced, I know where you go when you need to disappear properly. Her expression shifted through something complicated. Not anger. The recalibration of someone who has been known without consenting to it and is deciding what to do with that. Did you put me in a report? She said. No, I said, I didn't. The silence after that was the specific kind that carries weight. Why? She said. I looked at her steadily. Because by the time I found you, you'd already been careful and brave and right for 2 years, completely alone, and the people I was reporting to were the problem. I paused, so I stopped reporting. She held that. Outside, the rain had gone to almost nothing. Just a sound now. Barely there. She crossed the room. She stopped close. She looked up at me with the expression of someone who is very tired and has decided finally to set something down. When this is over, she said, quiet. The kind of quiet that means something else entirely. When? I said. She nodded once. Her hand found mine, not dramatic, not tentative, just certain, the most honest thing. I held it. The rain kept falling. The city outside went on being the city, indifferent and enormous, and entirely unaware that somewhere in a hotel room above a wet November street, 2 people who'd been running in opposite directions had, against considerable odds, arrived at the same place. It wasn't safe. It wasn't simple. It was, I thought, exactly worth it. If this story pulled you under, and you're not ready to surface yet, you're exactly where you belong. Reverie Velvet Tales drops new dark romance every week. Hit subscribe so the next story finds you before someone else does. And if this one stayed with you, leave a comment below. Tell me which moment broke you. I read every single one. Until next time, stay in the dark. It's warmer here.